these are the control arms that I got back from the machine shop, and see, they pressed these on, and these left loose, and we're not going to tighten these until this is on the car and we bounce it up and down so we get exactly where this is going to go. Here is the ball joint. You see how the upper ball joint, see, it's bolted on. Here's the other side. Here are the nuts on the top. So these are easy. The bottom ones on the control arms that have to be pressed. Here's what it looks like. And this is where the spring goes. So here's an important thing right here. This is where the end of the spring goes and locks into position. I'll show you that later on. And over here we have the oval bushing. Some cars have round ones and some have ovals. I don't know why. And here's the other side. So that was just pressed on or pounded on, whatever. Once again, you're looking at the oval. Here's the bottom side. This is the where you put the grease, where you put the shocks. Alright, that's the whole thing. So what we're going to do is paint these up and put them on. So the other thing I did to know which set matches, I took a little hacksaw, put a little cut there. I put another little cut here. So I know that these two go together. And I remember that I put a little notch on the ones that go to the driver's side. So the other pair go to the passenger side. The next thing we're going to do is install the upper control arm, which fits over here, but it goes up through there and hooks on those two other bolts. The next thing is we're going to install the lower control arm, and that goes here and here. So let's do the first one, the upper one first. So what you do is, it's a little difficult, but you just take this bar and you put it over the top of these bolts right here. It goes right through here, and it goes right through here, and then we'll bolt it together. And then we got to remember to put the shims in just like we did when we took them out. So let's tighten up some of these bolts till we get a little closer. There's the first one, and we'll put the second one on. These are 11/16, both of them, and of course they're just going to take a while to get on. Now one more thing is that we left these loose, and we won't tighten these until we both front and back, until after we get everything all assembled and get some weight on it and move it up and down and have it come into position, and then we'll tighten it up. But that's the last thing. Okay, now we're going to put the lower arm on. It's going to go here and here. Here's the upper one is in position, ready to go. Here's the ball joint. Got the ball joint pressed in on the bottom. So we'll just lift this lower control arm into position. Get lucky, just slip right in. Sure looks like it. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, that one all the way through. Put that on that one. And this one slips right in there. Okay. Now we'll tighten these up almost all the way, but I want to have it loose. So that'll be easier to move up, put the spring in here and move this up. So let's just tighten this up a little bit and we'll come back. Alright, now that we got the upper and lower control arm in place, floor jack and the back over here. Now we got to put our buddy the spring in. Just have to be careful with this guy. So we'll set him in there. Oh, an important thing here. This end of the coil must go right in this slot here. Right here. So let's just gently ease them up in there. Let me lift that up a little bit more from the jack.
Okay, what happens here is I noticed in the film why we have troubles with the coil spring compressor tool, and that is because it's not installed right. And I left it in this video because I want to show what happens when you do it wrong. Now you'll see where the arrow points, it should be in one of those grooves, the coil spring itself, so it doesn't slip out.
Okay, so that coil, the end of the coil is exactly in the right position. Okay, I'm going to check it one more time. Okay, that's perfect. Alright, so we have it almost ready to go. But we're missing the spindle. Here's the new spindle that we're going to put on here with the new brakes. And we also need the arm here that connects to the steering mechanism, but that's on the old drum brake. So let's go take that off first. Now we put some DW40 on here to make it a little easier. We broke them loose. Oh yeah, but we have to hold them from the other side. Yeah, I guess we should have taken these off on the car. Probably would have been a little easier. But it is what it is. It works a lot easier if you have the tools, but it's too lazy to go get them. So you just push this down and give it a twist. So you just come right off. Normally I pay close attention to where all these springs go, but we don't have to do that today because we're not putting this back on. And here's what we're looking for. So we'll just hold this side as this 3/4. Here's the other one 3/4. That's one side. And here's the other one. There's the second nut. This is what we want right here. So let's go put that on. So we'll take the second one apart. So let's just pull off the calipers. right in there. Alright, next thing, we take the rotor off. There's the bearings. There's the inner bearing. So we'll save that for later. So we'll put the steering arm in there. And this is what hooks onto the tie rod and over here. So I'll tighten this up. We'll tighten that one. And we'll come over here and tighten the second one. Okay, so we finished tightening this up over here. So that's got to put a spindle, we got the backing plate. Alright, now let's come back over to the wheel and we'll put this right in. There's the lower one. So I'll tighten that up pretty, almost where it's supposed to go. And then we're going to line this up and lift the jack nice and gently.
That was really scary. Someone could have been seriously hurt if they were hit by the lower part of the spring compression tool. That was caused by not installing it correctly. So now we have a real problem. The floor jack is under the lower control arm, and there's no access to the spring compression tool main bolt so that we could install that lower part and recompress the spring.
Okay, that's not exactly how you're supposed to do this. So what I did is loosen this bolt here in order to get some threads on the top one. And we'll tighten the bottom one up a little bit. Okay, that's almost where that's supposed to go. Now let's go back up to the top. Okay, that's almost tight. So now we just have to find where the cotter pin goes, the hole for the cotter pin. So we found a little hole for the cotter. Then we'll just bend this over. One way, one the other. Okay, that's the upper one. Do the lower one. Okay. Stick the cotter pit in there. And then we'll just bend it over. Alright. Just push the other one the other way. Okay, so that's secure. There we go. Now, I guess we can lower the jack and take our spring compressor out, one that didn't work so well. We just have to run the rod all the way down through so that these two things compress together so it can make it out of the little hole in the bottom. Same with the whole thing all the way down. You can slip it out, but you gotta have, so when the rod comes up here, it spreads it out, but it has to go, the rod has to go below that. The last thing we'll do on this side is we'll install the shock. It's 2 half-inch bolts on the bottom here, and then just use the 9/16 up the wrench up on the top. First we'll extend it all the way. Stick the shock in here, and then we'll fish it. So we have 1 bolt here on the bottom, and here's the shock right down in here, coming up through the bottom. Okay, so I will just take that vice grip pliers, hook on, give it a little tug. Now I'll go and tighten the bottom bolts. You can see it right down here. Here's the 2 bolts on the bottom of the shock. Okay, now we'll go back up on top. Alright, the last thing over here, what we do is we need to tighten this bolt because we didn't, and we need to make sure we tighten this bolt over here. So let's just do that now, and I'll take care of all this bottom stuff when we go over to the other side. Now let's do the driver's side. The upper control arm, and it goes right over here on this bolt and on this bolt here. So I just lifted above all these wires, and we had to move the steering shaft. So I'm just going to put it over the top. And get it through here, and so the bolt goes through this rod. The same thing on the other side, but it's underneath the air conditioner, so you won't be able to see it. So we're able to lift it over the top. You can see right here. So we have 1 bolt on this side, and one on the other side. And remember, we have to put the shims in. So let's tighten this down. Now the next thing is to put the shims back in. So those are the back ones. In the front, let's see it. Front there was only one. So let's just tighten the rest of these bolts, the 2 bolts down. So I finished tightening the back one and the front one. This is 11/16. Alright, so the next thing I have to do with this particular car is I have to hook up the steering shaft again. The steering shaft, because I couldn't get this bolt off over here. So I'm going to just bolt this together really quick, and then we can work on the lower arm. Alright, we have the upper one installed. Now let's do the bottom one, and it goes right here and right there. Okay, that's one side. Now let's do the other side. All right. Okay, we'll just leave those like that. That way we will certainly remember to tighten it up afterwards. But this will give us a good freedom of movement here. Now, also, look on the bottom. Here's where the end of the coil spring goes, right there. So before we can put the spindle on and the backing plate, see, this is where the rotor is going to run, but the seals are one right here, or bearing is one here and one here. But in the meantime, we have to hook up this steering bracket in that. So if it mounts on the other side, the lower ball joint, upper ball joint will be here. This is where the tie rod end connects in. So that's what we have to put this together, and then we'll be ready to go to put it back on there. So let me just tighten all this back up. Okay, so we have the spindle all ready to go. We got the steering bar bolted on. And then here is the lower ball joint. And here's where it goes, right here. Here's the upper one. Let's see. And it will go. Okay, here's the upper one. There's the lower one. So what we'll do is, now we're going to install the spring in the lower control arm. What happens is the spring goes up into the frame here, and then it sits down here on the lower control arm right here. But here's the key item: the end of the spring has to go right here. There's a little groove here, and that is where this goes. So this has to go right there. Now what we're going to do is put a floor jack here on the bottom, and then we'll put the spring in here, and we'll slowly jack it up. So I just have it on loose. We'll tighten it up later on. So now we have to compress the spring, stick it in here, stick it over here, lift this up until this connects with the upper ball joint. So that just goes in there. We'll tighten it all up, and then we'll have this coil spring installed. Here's the tool that you rent. Well, I ran it from O'Reilly's because they just basically let you rent it for free. Here's the bottom part that goes through here. Okay, so this goes in like this, fits here on the bottom, one washer on the top, one on the bottom. These two clamp onto the coil spring wherever you select it, but when you're putting it in, it's not so bad, but when you're the very first time, you have to put this through the bottom here. So this is the hardest part, but you have to just wiggle it in. It will go through there. And then this clips onto the coils. This sticks on the other coil, and by turning it, you compress it. Okay, so we're going the opposite. What we want to do is compress it first so that we can stick it in there. This is the bottom. Okay? So let's just pick a spot here. Okay, I want to be able to, if I get this up high enough, but I don't want it up on the top because this disappears into the housing or into the frame. But now we're going to stick the other part in, the lower part. Now remember, it goes through these two, goes between these two washers. Here's the lower part, and it'll sit right here. So it goes in there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is hook these back up on the top. So we have the spring compressor in the spring, see, up on the top, hooks around 2 times, this on the bottom. Now notice here, I put it in the groove here, and it's also sort of in a groove on the other side, and that is so that it's basically in the center of the spring. Now what I did when I took this out is I marked it where I put these and basically how much I compressed it. But since I painted it and haven't worked on this in three weeks, I forgot. So we're just going to guess. So we're going to tighten this up. But I have to be careful because now this is all spring loaded. And most likely, if this does slip, it is coming out this way. So we're going to want that away from us because that's the only way it can come out. Because of the way it comes, the way you install it. So let me tighten this up and get it ready, and then we'll trial fit it inside and make sure it goes right to that point. This thing, just part of the spring, and we'll put the floor jack under there and lift this whole thing up. So we have a, what size is this? 3/4 socket, and I'm using a 1/2-inch drive, and I'm just compressing this down. This is coming in. You can see the coils are less spaced than the ones on the outside. And remember, this thing lets loose, it's going that way, so we're still good. Okay, I'm gonna guess that that's enough. All right, so the next thing is to get it in. So the coil spring fits. Just gotta be, have to be low there. I'm nervous with that because it's like a loaded bomb. So I'll put the coil spring up inside the housing and down here. So now remember what I told you about putting the coil spring in the right place. Here we go, we got the arm on here, so we need a little more room. So what we'll do is, what we're doing here is basically lifting, we're lifting this off the ball joint so it connects it to here. And then we're going to just tighten these back up. Once I tighten it up here and here, then I can release the pressure and uncompress the spring. So we'll just tighten this up a little bit more. Tighten this one here. Okay, this one's almost tightened, so what I'm going to be doing is looking for where to put the cotter pin in. Okay, that looks like it's it. Through a hole, I'll do the same thing here, but now I want to release this. So I'm going to lower the jack down. I'm going to check right in here and see if the coil spring is in the right spot. And if it's not, then we have to tighten this up a little bit and turn it into the right position. Okay, so what we're doing is looking to see this end right there is in that little notch, and it appears to be. So we have basically the coil spring installed. What we have to do is uncompress the spring. Alright, you can see the bottom part of the spring compressor here, and here is the upper one, the two blocks with the fingers. So now that I made sure that the spring is sitting in the right position and I have the ball joints hooked up, I'm going to just release everything. Now make sure we can get that guy out of there. Here with the rod out, we just take this out. Alright, the next thing is to just wiggle these two together so that they fall through the spring. And here it comes. It just comes out through here. So basically you just have to wiggle this out. Now that this bolt is tight, we can put the cotter pin in there, go on the back side and twist that over. And we also have to come to the lower one here, the cotter pin in and go around the back side and bend it over here, bend it over here, and then what we have to do is come back over to the arms and tighten up the bolts, because we didn't tighten those. There's one here and the other one is right here, so we're going to tighten those up. Okay, the top arm is on already, so that's all fastened up. The only thing now we have to do is tighten these, but we have to wait until we put weight on the car before we totally tighten these up. And from there we will put the rotors on here, and then we'll come back, put the brakes, hook up the brake line over here, and then we'll come back and we'll grease these, the ball joints, the upper ball joint and the lower ball joint. Next thing to do is install the shock. I already put it in here, and there's 2 bolts here on the bottom, and you see it goes right through the spring. There's a hole right in the frame, and here's where it comes up to the top, so these wires out of the way. Then we have a rubber grommet that goes on first. With a washer, a little nut. So we'll just tighten this up. So what I usually do is tighten this, and then if this starts moving, I usually put like a pair of vice grip pliers right around here and tighten it up. Okay, so that takes care of the top part of the shock. Alright, next thing I want to do is put the 2 tie rods in and this adjusting sleeve. So you have to pay attention. This is the outer. What I did is when I took this off, I didn't adjust it or whatever, I left it the same. Okay, so that will go here like that, which is a cotter pin. Alright, and this is the inner one. So this will go here. There's the cotter pin and the grease fit. Okay. Alright, and here's adjusting sleeve. Okay, so what we're going to try to do is get this about where this one is, and I'm going to measure from this point to this point, this point, this point, and so that the towing sort of stays more in on the front end of the wheels than on the back end. Not that that's going to count, it's just going to make it so we can drive the car and get it lined up, because there's no way that we can line this up ourselves. Okay, so let's just start. Take these off. Okay, so let's put these on one side, one on the other. We'll start this one. We'll start this one. And then I will turn these, and that means they'll go on equally. Okay, so if you line these 2 up, they look okay. Line these up, they look about right. I'm not that concerned about it because we can adjust it later on. I just wanted to show what's the general concept, how we do this, and then we'll just tighten these up. This one gets tightened up over here. Same thing with this one. But we'll tighten these up as we get it up here so we can put it in a nice easy spot. So let's install it. Okay, so what we did is I straightened the steering wheel out. This is fairly straight, or I think it is anyway, the wheel. Now we also pre-adjusted these using the old ones. So now we have to install the inner tie rod over here, and then the outer one. Alright, so let's just do this one, because this one is just... Okay, there we go. Hold that one up. And being that we pre-adjusted it, it looks like it's falling in almost exactly the same spot as where we took it off. But once again, that's not our concern, because we're going to take it to a lineup shop and line it up. Alright, so that's one. Let's tighten the other one up. Line it up at the cockpit. Then over. We're going to tighten these up, one over here, and the other one here, and I'll put them in a nice easy location so that the next guy has an easy time. Alright, now we'll set up the tie rods for the passenger side. So this is inner tie rod. The inner tie rod goes over here, and this one is the outer. Now notice here that they're different colors. This one's painted, this one's not. So you notice the same thing on the other one that we installed, is that the outer was not colored. So once again, what we're going to do is just basically eyeball this to see if we can get this to line up like it is, so they're about the same. Now it should be, well, once we adjust this, we'll just keep on moving this until we get it right, because the steering wheel is straight, that wheel is straight, but we still don't know 100%. Because after we get this done, we have to have it aligned by a professional shop. This one. Alright, so we'll just tighten this up. One is right hand thread, one is left hand thread. So that one sort of lines up. That was this one. Now this needs a little bit more. Here's one. Okay, so here we are. Now this one here has a different type grease fitting. So we'll put that on just a little bit, and then once we get it on, we'll adjust it so that this will point to an easy location to where we can grease it. Alright, we have the tie rod put together, the adjusting sleeve in the center. So we will Put one up here. And the other one goes on the steering. So we'll bolt this up. Alright, we just line that right up for the cotter pin. Put the cotter pin in there. Bend it over. Alright, we'll go and do the other first. Let's see if I can tighten this up and we can get out at this. This is the grease fitting. So what we're just doing is turning this into a position that'll make it real easy for us to grease, and we don't have any excuses of not doing it. Okay, so what we'll do is face this straight down because all the rest of these are down. Alright, here's the cotter pin. Bend that over. Alright, the next thing we have to tighten up the sleeve. That's one side. Okay, that's not going anywhere. So we have the outer tie rod, the adjustment sleeve, the tie rod. Everybody's all bolted up. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is put on the stabilizer bar. And it's got two brackets. It goes right to the frame. And this goes to the lower control arm. And it also has this linkage assembly that connects to it. And this is the assembly that connects the sway bar to the lower control arm. So you have the bolt, alright, and then so you have a washer and a rubber. This goes on the bottom of the control arm. Another rubber and washer will go on the other side of the control arm. Then you have the spacer. And then you have the rubber that goes on one side of the sway bar and rubber on the other side. So basically the sway bar connects up here, and this is where the control arm hooks up. Now let me show you what it looks like when it's on the car. You'll see it right here. Here, you'll see it right here. Here is the nut that tops it all off, but you see two rubber bushings on either side of the sway bar with their washers, and then you have the spacer, and then on the bottom you'll see where the rubber goes on one side of the control arm, and then if you look at the bottom, here's where the other one is. So it's just one big bolt that makes that connection. So what I've done so far, I bolted the sway bar on the frame, left it really loose in both spots, and then I just made this connection. So now let's just assemble the driver's side, and then after we get it all put together, and then we can tighten it all up, and that'll complete this assembly of the sway bar. I turned the steering wheel to the left to give us more access over here. So let's just start. We got the bolt, so we'll put a washer on these rubbers and stick one on this side, and that'll go on the control arm. Need a washer, need the spacer, another washer, another rubber grommet, and I'll push it right through the sway bar. And I'll put another rubber grommet on here for pushing. Okay, so what we need is just a little bit more space, just a touch more. And that's why I left the sway bar loose, so that we can get a little maneuverability here. Okay, we're good. All right, now we're just gonna start tightening this all up, and it'll be complete. But by leaving the sway bar loose from the frame, it gives you mobility to get all this connected. Okay, so this is a 9/16, 9/16 on bottom. Okay, so let's go tighten everybody up just a little bit, and then we'll come back. Okay, to recap what we did, we just put on the sway bar. It's got 2 bolts holding this bracket over here. We got 2 bolts over here, and then that connects right here, this connecting assembly, where it's got rubber grommets, washers, a spacer. That goes to the control arm. It goes bolts to the bottom here. All right, and then we replaced both tie rods, the outer and the inner, and we have a new adjustment sleeve here. We also did that for the other side, the inner, the outer tie rod adjustment, and that connects over to this steering bar, which of course connects over to this side. And then we also replaced the Pitman arm that bolts to the frame. Remember, you said we have to be very careful because if the bolts fall down in the frame, it's just really hard to get them out. Alright, so now that takes care of all the steering. So everything with the steering is new here. Now we'll just put grease in all the joints, and we're ready to have it lined up. And how they're going to line it up is by loosening these 2 bolts and turning this, and that will turn the wheel until they get it straight. And here's the other one over here. Now, in replacing the spring, it's right here, you have to take out the shock first, and it's 1 bolt on the top and 2 bolts here on the bottom holding it. Bolt on the top just sits right here. Okay, so we remove the spring, we put a floor jack here, loosen the bolts for the upper ball joint, and also the bolt for the lower ball joint, and then we were able to lower the arm down and then I put a safety chain around here so it wouldn't knock my teeth out in case it jumped out. Then lower it, and then that'll separate, and then you can take the spring out from there. And since we put new bushings in on the lower control arm, we have to take the bolt and nut off on this side, and then there's one on the other side right there. And to take the top arm off, we have to take these two bolts, this one right here and this one right here, and I also counted the spacers, so I put the same spacers in the right slot. And then it just, well, and also on this thing we had to remove the steering column rod because there's not enough space to push the upper control arm out of the way after you take the bolts off. And then we just repeated the whole process.